Today, we're doing a top 10 buyer questions when buying the private condos. Could be new condo or resale condo. To welcome back, for me and Manuel, we have been doing a lot of private properties resale as well as a new launch. So we have met a lot of customers and there are a lot of questions. So we try to consolidate all these questions into the top few. There's no right or wrong.
And like what Dennis has touched on earlier on, the reason why these 10 questions were chosen was because this was accumulated through a lot of experiences in that presentation.
Commonly asked questions.
Yeah, very commonly asked questions. And 90% of the time, this is what we are faced when we deal with customers at show flats and even in resale projects.
Okay, shall we start the first topic? Does it have to be freehold?
The age-old question of does it have to be freehold?
Right.
Well, personally, in my opinion, right, I feel that does it have to be freehold really depends on what is your purpose and agenda when buying the property. Because I feel that if you are looking for just an investment project, and if you're very clear that is what you're looking for, it doesn't really have to be freehold most of the time. And the reason is because we all know that when you're comparing between the freehold and a leasehold property, right, a freehold will definitely be a little bit more expensive because of its ever long lasting tenure. So because the entry level for freehold property is higher, therefore if we were just to be looking to do an investment where the objective is to go in as low as possible and to exit as high as possible, then a freehold property may not really fit your objective at the end of the day.
The views is that if freehold and leasehold 99 are same price, go for freehold.
Oh, definitely, yes.
But I think the key issue is when the price difference start to get too big. If you look at the screen, we have in Singapore we have basically three main types of tenure: the freehold versus the leasehold. I think for 999, for the sake of discussion, most people regard 999 as freehold.
Yes.
So basically, this whole question is about freehold versus 99. As a rule of thumb, if the price difference is more than 20%, then it might become too expensive. From my experience, right, a lot of first-time buyers will always want to go for freehold. But to be honest, I think if this is your first private property, it need not be your freehold because this might not be your last or final property. You can go invest in the 99 years first, make your first bucket of gold, profit from there, and move on. But if you are bent on freehold, your choice will be very limited.
Yes, yes. And not forgetting that when you are choosing to buy a freehold property, be it whether it's for a resale or new launch condo, don't forget if you enter high, you have to exit high. So that may not be achievable if you have a very short time horizon on hand at the moment. In my experience also, Dennis, I feel that for buyers who do pursue freehold property, right, they tend more to be end users in this case.
Yes.
The reason is because they don't see themselves exiting anytime soon.
Yes.
They can see themselves living here comfortably for the next 20 years. And they don't want to be worried about the value of their property. Once 20 and 30 years have passed and they decide, okay, it's time to sell, it's time to move on. Oh, but wait, if it's a leasehold, if they have lived in a leasehold property, that value may have already dropped by a little bit, because we all know for leasehold property, with the passing of time, the value can deteriorate. And that will be covered on actually in a second topic after this. But back to this topic first and foremost, for freehold end users, right, they are at least safe in the knowledge that when they choose to exit in 20 to 30 years time, the value more or less retains. You know, it's still very attractive to a lot of resale buyers because of its rarity and scarcity, and also because if they choose to stay on until it reaches a en bloc stage or the en bloc age, there's a good chance that they can exit at a very high price.
I think what Manuel have said is correct. If you are going to buy a freehold, you need to have a longer term holding period, a more longer term perspective, because since you enter high, it takes a longer time for you to appreciate to a level that you feel comfortable. You have to be patient, and if you're buying for own stay, for own occupation, then the timeline can be 20, 30 years or even longer, so that should be a problem. Another way to look at it, if let's say you are an investor, you intend to hold only less than 10 years, it means buy from day one and sell within 5 to 10 years, I think 99 years is also okay. Because from buyer's point of view, when the buyer asks you, how old already? As long as the tenure is between 10 years, they are likely to be okay.
Yes, still very acceptable actually.
Usually they will not ask too many questions.
Yes.
Yeah. So if your investment period is shorter, like 10 years and below, 99 is perfect. Actually, I did a video on this, when 99 is better than freehold. Have a look at it when you're free.
Yeah,
right?
Sure.
Okay.
I'm sure they will, Dennis.
Yeah. All right. So now we are on to the next topic. Old aging condo has no value. What do you think, Manuel?
Okay. Well, this actually ties in quite nicely with the first topic earlier on, Dennis. Whether does freehold really matter, right? So, old aging condo has value or not? I think that's very subjective actually, because it all depends on the tenure of this condo. So, as you can see from the chart over here, for old aging condo that it is leasehold, the property must cover the buyer till 95 years and above in order for them to fully maximize their CPF usage.
I think Manu is talking about the CPF usage.
Yes.
I need to introduce this guy called Bala, or rather the Bala curve. Right, this is a scientific a table invented many years during the old colonial time, literally invented by this guy called Bala. So what happened was that this table is used currently by our government body to ascertain and to determine what is the value for a freehold land versus a leasehold land. So if you look at the graph, right, leasehold 99 years condo or HDB will depreciate more when it hits when there are only 60 years remaining. The depreciation will get higher, and so you lose more value. There's no ruling for this CPF usage.
Yes.
Before that, as long as your lease is less than 60 years, there will be a limit in your CPF usage, as well as a limit on the loan. That means you can't take a full loan. These two factors, limit on CPF usage plus the limitation on loan, does affect the old condos. Now government has tweaked to this old ruling.
Yes.
It's a bit complicated, but let us try to explain a bit. Now they tweak, as long as the youngest owner, the remaining lease plus the age is beyond 95 years, then there will be not too much limits on the CPF usage itself.
Yes.
Yeah.
But however, in this case, if the remaining balance lease of the property and added up with the age of the youngest purchaser in this scenario, there will be limitation, as you can see on the graph over here, as to how much CPF can be utilized over here. Now, this policy has actually affected a lot of resale HDB actually, because a big majority of HDB in Singapore actually do not fulfill this criteria,
right,
where the remaining lease and the age of the youngest buyer do not even come up to 95 years. We see that very often in a very mature estate.
The objective of this tweak, right, by the government was to allow buyers have more freedom, because last time, as long as your lease is less than 60s, you can't take the max loan and you can't use a CPF.
So to put it simply, right, whether an old aging condo has any value or not, first of all, we have to determine the tenure of that condo. If it's freehold, hey, not much of a limitation and not much of an effect actually. In fact, from what we see, Dennis, for older condos that are freehold, right, it sometimes actually appreciates in value. But unfortunately, for leasehold condos, with the passing of time, as we touched on the first topic, there can be a drop-off in the value after a certain point in time, as what Dennis has shown in the Bala curve. Okay, around the 60-year balance lease mark, that's where we see a significant drop in decline.
Freehold, you have to hold a longer term perspective. Because it's freehold, so age or time doesn't matter. Okay, but anyway, freehold constitutes a smaller proportion of the total properties in Singapore. Answer to the question is that it's true. Old aging condo will depreciate more, especially when it get older, especially after they cross the 39 years mark. But having said that, there's one very special phenomenon en bloc. Yeah. So this en bloc changed the whole dynamics of this old aging condo. It defied the Bala's curve.
Yes.
Because when it's en bloc, people always tell me that en bloc is still baby, it means straight loyalty.
Yes.
The buying price by the developer will likely be 150% to 200% of market value.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter whether it's high floor or low floor. So this really defies Bala's curve.
Yes.
That's why this phenomenon, when the government allows lease top up, it created a class of investor who purposely look for very old condos in the hope of en bloc one day.
Yes.
But be careful, you have to hold a longer time period, because there's no guarantee that any condos will be en bloc.
Yes.
Although I believe that old condos, especially 30 plus, 40 plus years old, old condo will likely be en bloc, because when it gets too old, the maintenance will be higher. Your MCSE fee will get increased. If you notice that a lot of old condos, for example, the Mandarin Garden, a lot of old condos, they had a lot of sheltered car parks on the surface. This surface sheltered car park actually is a bit of a it's a luxury because it's a waste of space. And these are so-called the very old school design.
Something you almost don't see in much of the modern condos these days at all.
That's
actually.
Right.
So it is not to say that old aging condos has no value, even if it's a leasehold one, because like what Dennis has mentioned earlier, en bloc is actually giving these old aging condos a second life actually.
Right.
But be very careful if you were to purposely pick an old condo just for the hope of getting an en bloc, because to be really honest with you, what are the considerations the developer have in mind when selecting a site to purchase for en bloc? Only they know most of the time. So do your homework before you purchase.
And for en bloc, right, it takes about 80% of the total share value or shareholders to vote yes. So assuming that you own only one unit, you're just one of the minority. So you're not in control. You have to be prepared to hold long term. Who knows? En bloc could happen in 5 to 10 years. It could happen in 20 years. It might not happen at all. So, but what you can do while waiting is that this investor who are buying in the hope for en bloc, likely they are going to rent out. So as long as there's passive income and your cash flow is not tight, you are ready to hold long term, yes, then go ahead and buy an old condo for this so-called en bloc potential.
Lastly, I just want to add on for these old aging condos, right? Always do your due diligence. I personally feel that getting an en bloc sale is actually better than striking lottery, because there's a lot of effort involved actually. You who are not involved in the en bloc sale, right? You may not know that there's a lot of work behind the scenes actually.
Of course.
From setting up the collective sales committee to getting the consent of 80% of the management to actually eventually finding a purchaser is a real roller coaster, right? So always do your due diligence.
Actually, I have a video called "Does Age Affect Property Price?" So have a look. So have a look at the video. We are free. We have had a lot of HDB upgraders upgrade to their first private condo, as well as a lot of buyers who move on to buy the second or third private properties. So you need any advice, anything, just feel free to give us a call below.
At this number over here.